Well, welcome to the feedback discussion for week 5, which of course was on the subject of designing for livable and climate adapted cities. And we have with us today Professor Nigel Tapper, who needs no introduction because he was the lead educator and designer of the week 5 course. Nigel, we have had some terrific feedback from our learners from all around the world, and in many respects I think we're learning as much as they are because we're getting terrific insights of their own particular conditions they live in and their experiences. We had someone from Zambia, a learner from Zambia, a friend of ours now, he's a regular correspondent with us, who asked the question about, and I'll read it out actually, about the broader health benefits of trees in urban situations. He says, trees provide numerous benefits, especially with mitigating air pollution in urban areas, and provide a very positive impact on human health. Well, of course they do, but what's your scientific perspective on that comment?
Well, look, thanks very much for that question. Trees perform a remarkable function in the urban environment. They, as well as, of course, mitigating heat through evapotranspiring water, they provide some sort of flood mitigation too in various ways. But one of the things in particular they do is they actually remove air pollution from urban air. And they do this in a couple of ways. There are two ways. They either absorb air pollution onto the surface of leaves and the vegetation structure, or they take it into the stomata. And there are a number. The stomata, of course, are the little kind of hollows in the leaf that open up during the day to allow photosynthetic activity to happen.
Right.
So basically, there are a number of pollutants that can be removed, both through what we call dry deposition to the surface of the vegetation, or by being taken into the cellular structure of the trees. These things include nitrous oxides, sulfur oxides, carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and particulates in general. So they do a really good job.
Yeah.
One of the problems is if there's too much air pollution, it can actually poison the trees. So in some urban environments and some heavily urbanized countries, such as Germany and Switzerland and so on, we do actually see what we call dieback, where the trees have just been overwhelmed by pollution and they can't absorb enough and deal with it, and they actually suffer themselves.
Right. So they're sort of like they're the kidneys of the sky.
Yeah, they are.
You overload kidneys and your kidneys are in trouble.
That's quite right.
Yeah.
That's quite right.
That's a pretty comprehensive response to that comment. In response to your presentation on heath, health and vulnerability, a New Zealand learner from your home country, Nigel, made the following comment around the fact that the water-sensitive city approach and the issue of mitigating urban heat has a broader community benefit and has broader community implications. But he said vulnerable residents over 65 are more likely to be watching their pennies and therefore skimping on air conditioner use. He says, I think that this issue is very wide, wider than just a health sector issue. I think that it's wider than urban planning. It goes as wide as the social fabric of communities where looking after your neighbour may not be as common. You've seen that in Melbourne, haven't you, Nigel, and probably elsewhere as well. What's your comment on that?
Yes, absolutely. You find that different age groups have different vulnerabilities. And the older age group are particularly vulnerable. These are people in their 70s and 80s. They have a whole range of things to deal with. Of course, some are actually very active and well off and so on. But you also find more people living alone. You find that more people are dealing with ill health. Some people are relatively poor, and the correspondent is correct that sometimes that means they won't turn on air conditioning and they won't take the appropriate responses when it gets particularly hot. So that's one of the reasons why the older population, along with the very young population, are particularly susceptible to heat. But there is also there are also lots of opportunities for intervention. And what we've seen in Melbourne through the last two major heatwave episodes is that in the more recent one, we lost lives at about half the rate we did in the one that occurred in 2009. So in 2014, we lost people at about half the rate. And we believe that was because of much better community intervention. With not only were we able to provide a heat forecasting system that alerted people to it, the emergency response people were alerted to it, the hospitals, local government were making active decisions about intervening and getting people into cooler environments and so on. And as a result, we lost a lot fewer lives.
Yep. And the third comment from learners, and I think a comment we hear quite a lot from people in the community when we talk about urban landscape to provide cooling effects, is the trade-off between having trees that are indigenous and able to survive local conditions, but might not necessarily have the shading effect. Now we're standing under gum trees here today, and you can see the sun is coming through. It's not a 100% shading situation. So these species are indigenous and will survive in this countryside. However, they're not providing the shade. So that trade-off between having species of trees that provide good shade but are not necessarily indigenous, how do you manage that? What's your view on that?
You're quite right. In the Australian context, most of the indigenous trees provide a relatively small leaf, pinnate leaves, so they're designed to deal with heat and drought. As a result, they don't provide a lot of protection from sun. They do filter it out to some extent. And they also don't provide a lot of evapotranspirative loss, so they don't provide a massive amount of cooling. So we have this situation where we have to consider trees that actually have much broader leaves, and in a mid-latitude environment such as southern Australia, ideally trees that will be deciduous so that in the wintertime they shed their leaves and allow the sun in, but in summer provide a lot of leaf area that provides plenty of shade but also provides evaporative cooling. So in Melbourne at least, I think what we're doing is we're looking for southern European type trees that will provide that leaf area and not be too vulnerable to extreme heat and to drought, but trees that we can also provide some water to get the maximum benefit out of in terms of evapotranspiration. So that's effectively
it's a trade-off.
The way we're working. We're trading off between issues around water use and leaf coverage and the benefits that they provide. But one of the big issues that we do have and that we're working on is that we do recognise that urban environments are particularly difficult environments for trees. And so we're doing a lot of work on evaluating how trees respond to the urban environment and the urban canyon, looking at tree water use in different environments and whether or not we're able to supply sufficient water from roadways and so on to the trees to keep them healthy through an Australian summer.
Good. Thank you, Nigel. Well, that's been very useful. It provides a bit of extra depth to some of the issues that we've already discussed and feedback to our learners. Next week, we've gone to the first, we're 70% of the way there, Nigel. It's 5 already. It seems to have really flown. But we are in the home straight, as it were. The next 2 sessions are not so much about the engineering or the science or the physical planning, but more about the institutional and governance and regulatory requirements that you need to transition from where we are now for water-sensitive urban design to be business as usual. So thank you, Nigel, for your contribution to the course and to today, and we look forward to seeing the learners again this time next week. Thank you.
Bye.